And my involvement in the DREAM Act goes back to about 2001. But there had been a very large Latino population that had grown just in the past couple of years, in the 1995 to 2000, as immigration increased and as the need for the agricultural economy in Faribault grew, and manufacturing economy. One of the things, I was working with a priest named Father Thomas Joseph, and he would go and visit Latino families and undocumented families and talk about their future. And he'd bring me with them as we would go to people's homes. And so I would go to people's homes and say, if you send your child to our small Catholic school, I guarantee that they will go to college. Because we were a little school, but all of our students went to college. So I was visiting people's homes and I was making this promise and I was working for the school. It was a school I had gone to. It was a school that I loved. Well, what happened was kids signed up to come to our school, and then I learned about immigration status. Like, I really didn't know what that was. And so I had made a promise to families that these kids, that their children would go to college. And so I wanted to figure out, how do we make that happen? And so students I was working with go to college. We started in Faribault. There was a community college called South Central Community College, and we worked with the administration there, and they became one of the first schools in Minnesota to let undocumented students go to college paying in-state tuition. That was the first battle, which is, should students who are undocumented pay an out-of-state tuition, which was normally 3 times as much as an in-state tuition. So we started at one school, and then we went and worked at another school to work to get students to enter into this program. Now I'll go back to Southwest High School, which I had talked to before. So there was this group of students in Faribault. There's also a group of students in Southwest High School. And Southwest High School had a very strong Latino student population that was well organized, some good teachers. There was a teacher named Linnea Hempel Valdez, who was organizing a group there. And so when we realized that there was a group at Southwest and there was a group in Faribault, we got together. Another thing that happened, and this might have been in 2002, there was the labor unions in Minnesota organized a bus to go out to Washington, D.C. for immigration reform. And so this was a big deal because these were, very powerful organizations, labor unions, that were all coming together, and they were coming from across the country, and they were sending people out for a rally in D.C. and then a rally at the Statue of Liberty. And so I learned about this trip, and it must have been the fall of 2002. And so one of the young women who I was working with in Faribault, her name was Angie Gill. Angie went on that bus ride out to Washington, D.C. and New York. And when she came back, she had met immigrant leaders from across the state. And so that bus ride gave birth to an organization called the Minnesota Immigrant Freedom Network. And it was rooted out of these immigrant freedom rides, this trip to D.C. and to New York, from people all across the country. And so that organization was the organization that in Minnesota worked to pass the Minnesota DREAM Act. So, we got involved in it first because of specific kids, but then as you met more people, that became an organization. And the 2 leaders of that organization, a man named Mariano Espinoza, and Mariano has continued on. He was the leader of the Minnesota Immigrant Freedom Network. He now works for the city of Minneapolis, doing work with the Latino community. And then an artist named Kito Ziegler. And Kito was a photographer who had been a graduate of Macalester College. They worked as co-executive directors and ran that organization. And so, interesting, the Minnesota Immigrant Freedom Network was a very political organization focused on the legislature. Navigate started as a response to that, to be more of service and led by youth. But those organizations were both how I got involved. And why I got involved was, there were specific young people. There's a young man named Abraham, a young man named Oscar, a young girl named Angela. I think about, Maria, their lives, what they wanted to accomplish, and how if we didn't change the law, they wouldn't have access to college.